Welcome to Classic Trials. If you're new here, my name is Alita. I'm a lawyer licensed in California and DC, and on this channel, we make sense of the law one bite at a time. In this series, we observe and analyze the play-by-play of some of the biggest trials that have shaped the public consciousness of the American judicial system. In this season, we're working our way through the case of California v. Erik and Lyle Menendez. Growing up in Princeton, New Jersey, and then Beverly Hills, California, these young men had everything they could ever want, or so it seemed, until one night on August 20th, 1989, they approached Jose and Kitty Menendez with newly purchased shotguns. Put on trial for murdering their own parents, they claimed self-defense, arguing they were terrorized in their own home by abusive parents until they could take no more. Which argument is more convincing? Come join and see for yourself. Hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I hope that you all are having a wonderful Monday. For me, it's a very early Monday, so I apologize for being late again. 7 a.m. is kind of hard to make as it turns out. But I apologize for being late. Thank you everyone for your patience and also for the patience in rescheduling to a Tuesday, since yesterday I was on the road. Mr. Bites and we took a road trip this weekend up from Southern California up to Carmel. It was absolutely beautiful. We learned what it's like to road trip in an electric vehicle that was a rental, because I don't know if this is just a California thing or if this is a rental thing in general. Maybe it's a United States thing. But we knew that we needed to rent a car for just a little bit of time, and Hertz was like, "Hey, how about this EV? How about that EV? How about this EV? Did you know that we have a lot of EVs that we really want you to drive?" So anyway, so we decided to test it out, and road tripping with an electric vehicle that is like 100% on charge, and it had its challenges, but we knew that it was going to have some challenges, but it was overall, it was a good trip. Once we figured out how to find stations and how to sort of triangulate things and map things out, it was actually a really good trip. So love going to Carmel. I don't know if any of you have been before, but it is gorgeous, and this weekend the weather was wonderful. You might be able to see a little bit of a sunburn on my face, because I only realized halfway through the day that I really needed it. But anyway, all will be fine. So anyway, so thank you everyone for joining us and for hopping in today. And I see a bunch of mods here. I'm so happy about that. So thank you to the mods for being here as always. And let's get moving. So today we have two witnesses. We will be hearing for like 30 minutes of testimony, it looks like, from Mary Theresa Dominguez. It's funny because like the description on Court TV's website for her is something along the lines of she's the sister-in-law to the man who formerly owned the Beverly Hills house before the Menendezes bought it. So it's such a strange connection that it definitely makes me wonder going into it, like, just how much can she testify to? Like, how much experience does she have with the Menendezes that is relevant to this particular case? But obviously, it's relevant enough for the judge to have allowed it, because it if there was a a likelihood that it wouldn't be so relevant, then the judge probably would have not allowed her to testify. Let's be real. So we'll be hearing from her first, and then Lyle. We are going to start his testimony on Court TV's website. Lyle's testimony is in 5 parts. We will go through part 1 and through a significant portion of part 2. So it's probably going to be for a few weeks that we will be hearing from him. But yeah. So today is our part 1 of his testimony. Fair warning, trigger warning. Obviously he's going to get into all of the details, right? About abuse, about the killings, there's going to be a lot here. So if abuse is a touchy subject for you, it's tough to digest. Keep that in mind. Trigger warning. do whatever you need to do in order to manage your own mental health, right? It's not worth it just to like, need to know what's going on in this case. If you need to take a step back, go outside, hang out with some fur buddies, or, cuddle with someone, that is 100% okay and absolutely encouraged. So, there's going to be a lot of testimony from Lyle, and I imagine also from Erik as well. I haven't looked quite that far ahead, but we're going to be hearing from them for a long time. So I think that is about it. Okay, I've got my coffee. I'm ready to go. I guess we'll get into it. Yeah. All right. Here we go. Okay. And as always, I will update the pinned chat for who is testifying. So, but today it'll be really easy.
In the trial, both jury panels are back in the courtroom. To all of you, welcome back. Good morning. And we're ready to resume with the testimony. The defense may call its next witness.
Thank you, Your Honor. The defense would call Mary Theresa Dominguez.
Raise your right hand, please. Please continue to solemnly swear that the testimony you may give in the cause and attending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God. Please come up.
Sit over here.
You can tell us your full name and spell your last name.
My name is Mary Theresa Dominguez, Dominguez.
Just spell Teresa, please.
Theresa.
Mrs. Dominguez, what is your current occupation?
I work for Stater Brothers. I'm a department head there.
And Stater Brothers is a supermarket chain.
Yes, it is.
Do you have a sister who is also employed?
Yes, I do.
And what is your sister's name?
Her name is Linda Martinez.
And by whom is Miss Martinez employed?
Mark Slotkin.
And do you know what Mark Slotkin does, what his business is?
He deals in real estate and I forget the other part that he does, but
Does he also have a furniture company?
yes, he does. He deals in leasing antiques.
Now, to the best of your knowledge, in 1988, did Mr. Slotkin own a house
Yes, he
at
did.
722 Elm Drive in Beverly Hills?
Yes, he did.
And was there a time that you were aware that Mr. Slotkin had sold that house to a family named Menendez?
Yes.
Now, did you, at the time the house was sold, were you employed by Mr. Slotkin to do something with respect to his moving from the house?
Yes, I did. I was working there to remove all his belongings.
And were other members of your family working with you there as well?
Yes, my 3 children and my mother.
And over what period of time did you work for Mr. Slotkin at that home?
For a week.
And at the end of that week, what was the status of Mr. Slotkin's personal belongings?
Everything was removed. My sister had conducted an inventory of all his belongings.
And after Mr. Slotkin's belongings had been removed, were someone else's belongings delivered to the house?
The Menendez family had started bringing their things in.
Now, while you were working there packing up Mr. Slotkin, did you meet Mrs. Menendez?
Yes, I did.
And was there a conversation with Mrs. Menendez about your employment?
She asked me if I would stay and help her
And help her do what?
unpack.
And did you agree to do that?
Yes.
And therefore, when did you start working for Mrs. Menendez in relation to when Mr. Slotkin had his possessions removed?
The Monday following the weekend, I finished on Sunday for Mark, and I started on Monday.
Okay, so now we have a little bit of a connection. So she was helping to move Mr. Slotkin out when he was moving out of the house, and then the Menendezes were moving in the same day, which is kind of wild. I've never seen that. Usually there's at least a couple days in between someone moving out and someone else moving in. I mean, oftentimes you'll see someone will, they'll have cleaners come in to like clean all of the surfaces because, when you move out, you've got a lot of like debris that's kind of left behind, whether that's like dust and grime and things like that, or like pieces of packing material. There's like, usually someone else that comes in. So it's kind of strange that like there was like that much of an overlap between the two sides, but maybe the Menendezes were just in a hurry to get moved in, I guess. Um, so that's interesting. I totally forgot to tell you guys, this is a little bit of a non sequitur, but kind of not really, because we're talking about the Beverly Hills house. So this weekend, also the day before we drove up to Carmel, I actually had a work lunch in Beverly Hills. And afterwards, I was like, I wonder how far the Menendez house is. So I actually drove by. I drove by like a crazy person. I even took a photo of like the front of the house. It took such a creeper shot. That poor family that lives there now. They probably deal with that all the time. But yeah, so I saw it. And yeah, I mean there's people living there, there's cars and stuff. There was some kind of, it looked like they were maybe going to have some kind of an event or something. There was some sort of a van out front and some people that were like seeming to work to like set something up maybe. So I might post that to Instagram later. Now that I remember it, even though it's like I want to make sure that I look at it first to make sure that there's no like license plates in there. But even though like they could be owned by the people that live there, in which case the address is out there on the internet, like that's how I found it. But anyway, so yeah, so it's around, it's there. Me being a creepy creepster and actually driving by and taking a photo. So so anyway, yeah. Um oh, that's so funny. I think there was even a sign up on the Beverly Hills house at one time along the lines of, "Yes, this is the house," or something. I mean, yeah, it's I mean, it's on what was, where did I find it? What website was it? It was something like the Morbid LA tour or something like that. So like there's probably a bunch of places that you can go that are like famous places where, I mean, yeah, there are famous places where people died. Like you could go to the, what is it? The Whiskey A Go-Go bar where River Phoenix died. Like there's a lot of places where notable people have died, that you can go and check that stuff out. Um, but yeah, you're definitely a true crime fan now. I mean, I was curious. I was like, I'm probably like pretty close. So I mean, yeah, and I was like literally like a mile away. So yeah, I think that's the creepiest thing I've probably ever done. Um, but anyway, totally random aside. Let's get back to talking about actually what happened. And yeah, let's move on with the testimony here. But I just thought I would share that with you guys.
And how long did you work at the house on Elm Drive for the Menendezes, assisting them to unpack?
I think it was a little over a week.
And at some point in that week or so period, did you have a conversation with Mrs. Menendez about her husband?
I asked her what her husband did for a living.
And what did she tell you her husband did for a living?
She told me he was a plastic surgeon.
And did she say anything about his practice?
Yes, she told me they came from Florida and they went to New York, and he had a good practice out there, and they decided to come to California, and that they were going to live in Calabasas, or they were living there, building a home there.
And then she indicated now they had moved to Beverly Hills.
Yes, uh-huh.
And did she indicate that he had had a plastic surgery practice in Now, during this week or so period that you observed, did you see Mrs. Menendez every day during that period?
I've seen her almost every day.
And when you saw her, did she always or usually seem to be holding something in her hand?
Objection, Your Honor.
Overruled. You can answer the question.
Yes,
And what was it that you saw her holding in her hand when you saw her?
a glass.
And was it an empty glass or was it a glass with liquid?
It had liquid in it.
She's drinking on the job.
And could you tell what the type of liquid was?
No.
And would you see her sipping from or drinking from this glass?
Yes.
Over that same period of time, did you observe Mrs. Menendez on the telephone?
Yes, she was on the phone quite a bit.
And did you ever see her making calls in a somewhat unusual manner?
She just seemed upset a lot.
Objection calls for speculation. Motion is strike.
Overruled. The answer will stand.
Yeah, you can tell if someone is upset.
Did you see her or did you notice her leaving the house at any point to make telephone calls?
Yes, she would go out to her car and make phone calls.
So she'd make phone calls from the car phone?
Yes.
And to the best of your knowledge, at the time that she would do that, were the phones in the house working?
Yes.
During the time that you worked at that house, did you have an opportunity to see the layout of all of the rooms?
Yes.
And calling your attention to the master bedroom, did you observe the bathrooms that were attached to the master bedroom?
Yes.
And with respect to one of them, did you observe any feature or aspect of one of those bathrooms that was new to your experience?
Objection, irrelevant and vague as to time.
Objection sustained. Please rephrase the question.
Did you observe the shower in one of the master bedroom bathrooms?
Yes, I did.
And would you describe for the juries what that shower looked like?
Objection, vague as to time, Your Honor. This was before the Menendezes moved in.
Sustained.
Dang.
Was the shower in the same condition after the Menendez family moved in as it was before?
Yes, it was.
Would you describe what the shower looked like?
It was really long, I'd say, from maybe the end of the desk to probably about right here. And they had openings on two different sides, and it had maybe 8 shower heads.
It was larger than an ordinary shower?
Yes.
And based on its size, did it appear that more than one person could fit in it at a time?
Yes.
Excuse me, could we get an estimate of the?
I don't know. What were you referring to? You pointed
Just
to
the
something.
length of it.
What
the
length? What were you pointing to?
The end of the desk, I
What do
believe.
you mean over here?
Mm-hmm.
This right here,
Mhm.
what I'm pointing to?
Mhm.
From here
Yes.
to where you are?
Yes, to about right here.
About 8 feet or so.
Seems like a pretty big shower.
Now, do you recall a day when you were working at the
Also, yeah. For anyone unfamiliar with this case, says Care Bear, Jose Menendez was not a plastic surgeon. He was an executive at an entertainment company during this time. I don't understand why Kitty would lie about that. Like, does she think that like him being an executive, like that, doing the work that he did was like not impressive enough? Or I don't quite understand why she would lie about that. It's such a strange thing. Yeah, it's weird. I mean, yeah, I guess maybe she thought it was more impressive, Igloo Pup. Maybe. But why? Like, it's still pretty impressive that he's doing the work that he did. I don't know. Anyway, but yeah, that's a massive shower. I don't know. I'm still trying to figure out why we're getting into the details about the shower. Maybe there's going to be some weirdness that we're going to be getting into. But okay, let's continue on.
the Menendez home when you came across some printed material in 2 different locations in the home.
Yes.
And would you first tell us what were the 2 different locations where you noticed this printed material?
In the master bedroom, on window seat, and on the floor.
And was there another room in the house where you saw similar printed material the same day?
In the library by the entry.
Now, this library by the entry, you notice this courtroom is what we call panel that has wooden walls.
Yes.
And did that library by the entry also have wooden walls, panels?
Yes, it did.
Now, would you describe for the members of the juries what the nature of this printed material was?
It was men.
Vague as to which printed material she's speaking about at this point. I believe there's master bedroom and then also the library.
Yes, you can be more precise.
Was the printed material both in the master bedroom that you observed and in the library of the same type and nature?
Yes, they were.
And would you describe what these things were?
It was males. It was pornography.
And it was pornographic what? Magazines, books, what?
Magazines.
And it depicted what sex?
Male.
All males?
Yes.
And did it show males doing things with other males?
Yes.
What, without getting graphic, what kinds of things?
Having sex.
Okay. And if I could focus your attention on the materials that you saw in the master bedroom, approximately how many of these magazines did you see?
There was a box, and it had stacks about, I'd say, maybe this high.
If you hold your hands up so the judge
About
may see.
this high.
When you say a box,
2 inches or so, 2.5 inches.
Probably more than that, a little more than that.
3 inches.
was it like a packing box?
Yes, it was.
Let me show you something. Just as an example. I'm holding a box right now just for size purposes. How would this box that I'm holding, which, Your Honor, just as a standard Fellows Archive Bankers type box, how would this box compare in size to the one that you saw in the master bedroom?
The other was larger.
Larger than this?
Yes, because they had magazines laying flat, and then they had some that were on the side, and maybe a few videos that were in there.
There were videos in the box as
Yes.
well? And were all the magazines that you observed in the box of that same sexual nature?
Yes, because I kind of went through a few of them.
Now, turning to and now strike that. Apart from the magazines and videos in the box, were there also magazines on the window seat?
Yes.
And were they, from what you could observe, also pornographic magazines?
Yes, they were the ones I looked at first.
And all of the magazines that you noticed were male on male sex?
Yes.
Now, turning your attention to the materials in the library, were those also magazines of the same type?
Yes.
And what size stack of materials did you see in the library?
There was just one stack in there.
And did it appear to be all magazines?
Yes.
And did it appear to be the same type?
Yes.
Now, later on the same day in which you observed these magazines, did you notice that they were gone?
Yes, they were.
Was Mrs. Menendez at home, the Elm Drive house, when you made your observations of these magazines?
Yes, she was.
Now, on one of the occasions when you were, one of the days when you worked at this house, did you see Lyle and Erik Menendez at the house?
Yes, I did.
And on that same day, did you see their father, Jose Menendez?
Yes.
And would you tell us what behavior, what activity you observed on the day that you saw both Mr. Menendez and the sons?
They were going outside to play tennis.
And who's they?
The father and the sons, and the mother was going to join them.
And how do you know they were going outside to play tennis?
Mrs. Menendez told me.
And did you see
hearsay.
the sons and the father inside the house and exiting towards the tennis court?
Yes, I did.
And did you observe the demeanor or the looks of the sons at that time?
Yes, they were very sad. They looked like they were going to a funeral instead of going outside to enjoy themselves.
All right, objection sustained. The answer is stricken. You can rephrase the question.
Thank you. You've indicated they looked sad.
Yes.
Are there other adjectives you could describe without making an analogy to describe what their demeanor was? Did they seem lighthearted or serious? Did they seem frivolous or solemn?
Solemn.
Now, at some point after you had made this, we'll strike this. At some point, did you learn that Mr. and Mrs. Menendez had died?
Yes, through my sister.
Through Linda.
Yes.
And at some point before you learned that they had died, do you believe you told your sister about these things that you saw in the house?
Objection, hearsay.
Objection sustained. As to the form of the question, it's also vague as to what.
I'll withdraw that question, Your Honor. Mrs. Dominguez, did you, recently, put in process a string of events resulting in the defense in this case being contacted? No, I'll rephrase the question. Did you discuss your observations recently with your sister?
Yes, I did.
And was this the first time that you had told your sister about the magazines, or do you believe you had told her earlier?
I told her earlier.
And do you believe you told her before Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were killed or afterwards?
Before.
I have nothing further, Your Honor.
Any examination on behalf of Lyle Menendez?
No, Your Honor.
All right, cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Before we get into the cross-examination, yeah, I'm seeing in the chat some people kind of talking about this, and I'm kind of thinking about this as well, just because asking is the implication that Jose was gay and that gay men are abusers by nature. This is definitely a very very kind of tight walk to walk here. I am trying to place this back in the 90s as opposed to now early 90s at that. I was also during the weekend during our road trip, Mr. Bites and I happened to listen to an episode of Malcolm Gladwell's podcast Revisionist History, and he went through actually the making of Will and Grace, which was just such a fascinating story to listen to, because they were talking about how this was the first time, it's not like today where we've got streaming services and the shows that we watch today are kind of like directed at being edgier. That's like what they are going for, so that they collect attention from people, so that they collect a viewership. In the days of major network TV, where that was the main source of entertainment for people, it was different because you needed to find sort of common ground for the mass, right? So for the general populace to be able to accept a certain TV show and watch it and whatnot. And so what you ended up with was TV shows that generally ended up kind of walking a much more moderate kind of line, in a lot of different ways. And so the fact that Will and Grace came out with, one of the lead characters is a gay man, an openly gay man at that. It was in a lot of ways revolutionary, but it also drew a lot of criticism because it didn't touch on some of the more serious topics that were of large concern in the 90s in the gay community, in the LGBTQ community, which I guess at the time was just LGBT, if I remember correctly. But one of those was the topic of HIV. Like that was a huge topic in the community, and that was just, anyway, so like they didn't go into that in Will and Grace. And anyway, but so, looking at this now, I can't remember if Will and Grace had come on the air yet at this point, or if that was after, in which case this is very much before any kind of real big changes in the direction of where we are today. So the idea of talking about homosexuality, you have to remember that the ways in which these things are going to be discussed in a trial is going to be similar to network TV, right? You're talking to 12 people that have been plucked out from the general populace that, have been impacted by network TV and, pop culture as it exists at the time. And yeah, so this would have been a few years before Ellen DeGeneres came out, or Will and Grace. It's probably closer to Melrose Place. Yeah, probably. Yeah, that makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. So, but so you're talking to 12 people that are just average people from Los Angeles County. And that's still going to be different than plucking people from, Fairfax County, Virginia, or maybe a better example would be, some small county in Missouri. Like it's going to be different, but even still, in the time within the last decade, no, more than a decade. I remember, I think I was in college when it happened, when California voters, voted for Prop 8, voted for it in favor of Prop 8. It was basically to prevent gay marriage. Like that's something that even in California had happened, within this millennium. So there's the topic of homosexuality is very interesting to see how it's treated here. And it might not be treated the way that we would treat it today in a trial, especially, in a trial like this, where we're talking about also abuse and things like that. So I am very curious to see how they actually treat this and what exactly is the purpose of going into the kinds of materials that the Menendez family had in their moving boxes, moving in, that seemed to be of a homosexual nature, um, explicit magazines, we'll say. I mean, this live stream is probably not going to be. It's going to get demonetized anyway. Let's be real, just because of like we're going to get into all the details, right? So, but yeah, it is interesting. It is very interesting to see how it's treated and how it would differ today. Um, yeah, Delabar, I think you're right. As soon as I said Fairfax, I'm like, that's not the best example. But anyway, so it could be that the angle that Leslie is going for is something along the lines of Jose may have been a gay man and maybe he was, repressed for whatever reasons, and therefore he didn't feel comfortable acting in the ways of a normal gay man, and that conflated with other issues that he had and caused him to abuse his sons. I don't know. I'm not sure, but if you're feeling uncomfortable with the angle that they're taking, that the defense is taking here, like that's completely legitimate. And remember that things have also changed since the early 90s. Okay. So, all right. That's about that, but we'll see where things go with cross-examination and whatnot. I mean, we might not find out until closing argument exactly what the defense is going for with this particular information and how they want to use it. But Okay, let's go on.
Mrs. Dominguez, you indicated that your sister works with a man by the name of Mark Slotkin,
Yes.
and she's been working with him for some 23 years. Is that
Yes.
right? Does she work at the furniture business?
Yes.
And how long has she been working there?
Well, that business hasn't, well, it's been there almost as long, but she started with a handbag manufacturing company that he started.
This furniture business, is it located in downtown Los Angeles area?
Yes.
Are you familiar with Erik Menendez's girlfriend, Noelle Terlesky?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to the form of the question. It is it assumes facts, not in evidence, calls for
Rephrase the question,
speculation.
please.
Are you familiar with a woman by the name of Noelle Terlesky?
No.
Did your sister Linda ever mention
Objection,
that?
hearsay.
Mention what?
Mentioned that Noelle Terlesky works at
Objection,
that business?
hearsay.
Objection sustained.
Yeah, that's all hearsay.
Your sister actually works at that location?
Yes.
Now, when is it that you first spoke to anyone on this defense team about what you're testifying to today?
I'd say about a week and a half ago.
And the first time you were ever interviewed was on September 6th, is that correct?
Yes.
So you never told the defense team or anyone else about this, is that right?
Objection, Your Honor, misstates the testimony.
Overruled.
Is that correct, ma'am?
No.
You never told the defense about this until the 6th of September, is that right?
I talked to my sister, and my sister talked to someone for me.
So your sister got a hold of the defense,
Yes.
and then your sister then got a hold of you?
Yes.
Did your sister ever mention that she had spoken to anyone that she worked with at Mark Slotkin's furniture shop in Los Angeles?
Objection, Your Honor, I think that's pretty vague. I'm sure she's talked to somebody.
Okay, counsel, let's not expand beyond the legal objection. All right, objection sustained. Rephrase the question.
What discussion did you have with your sister about getting in touch with the defense in this case?
I told her I remembered about the magazines, and I felt I really couldn't sleep at night. I was thinking about it all the time, and I didn't know if it was of value. So I asked her what I should do.
Now, what prompted you to think that this perhaps was relevant?
Because I was getting ready to go to work in the morning, and I was listening to the radio.
And when was this?
This was, I'd say, 2 weeks ago.
Had you ever heard about this
I'm not
case?
sure the witness had finished her answer, Your Honor.
All right, objections overruled that she had responded to it. Next question, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Had you not heard of this case prior to 2 weeks ago?
Yes, I've heard of it.
In fact, you knew when the Menendezes were murdered. Isn't that correct?
I'm going to
Yeah.
object to the use of that word, Your Honor.
Rephrase the question.
You were aware when Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were shotgunned to death.
I'm going to object to that characterization. as well.
Overruled.
Is that correct?
Yes.
And that was 4 years ago?
Yes.
And had you been following this case at all?
Not really.
When you say not really, what do you mean by that?
I mean, I heard what happened to the parents, and I really don't get to watch TV or anything, very often. So I'd hear a little here and there. And it wasn't until I had heard about the children being abused.
Now, when was that?
Oh, I really can't remember when I started hearing about that.
Would you say that it was months ago that you had heard those claims?
I really can't say, that it was months ago. I really don't know.
How did you get your information? Was it through the television or through the newspapers?
It was the radio.
The radio.
Mm-hmm.
So you listened to a particular radio
Yes.
station?
Yes.
What is that?
It's called the Cat. It's a Western station.
And periodically there would be reports about this case?
Yes.
And at some point you heard that the brothers were claiming a
Yeah, it is a little bit troubling here. I mean, I understand someone saying like, "Hey, this might be relevant. I should talk to to the defense and see what they want to do. But yeah, it is a little bit troubling that someone is thinking, I saw, explicit images in magazines of homosexual nature owned by this family on the move-in day, and that seems like, therefore this is relevant to the question of abuse. I mean, it could be relevant, but is it dispositive? I don't know. I mean, I am kind of struggling a little bit with this, but today there would have been many more questions that would have been asked about, like, well, what do you mean about the connection of these things, or the defense would have had to draw a much stronger line of, like, this is what we are saying here. We are not saying that because there's the homosexual, you know, images in magazines here that were owned by the Menendez family, that therefore automatically, someone is an abuser. Um, but you definitely have to draw a much stronger connection today because, there's a much greater awareness of what it means to be gay, what it means to not be gay, different, variations of that topic around that. I mean, we have a much greater awareness of the lifestyle of, the I mean, not lifestyle, but, what the community looks like, right? Um I mean, because, to the point that I mentioned earlier about Will and Grace, they were like, you previously couldn't even like show people, interacting with other gay people in the community on network TV. It was just something that just wasn't done. So I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of your average people, like, I suppose to include this woman, that are well intending and well meaning, but don't have enough of an awareness to understand what homosexuality means and what it doesn't mean. But oh, this is kind of an uncomfortable part of going back to this trial. I am not gonna lie. Um, I it's a little bit of a struggle, but let's continue on here. That's one of the things about going back in time is culture changes over time. Um, our sensitivities change over time. The things that we think are acceptable, not acceptable, also change over time as well. And so sometimes when we go back in time and we re-examine the decisions that people have made in history, we're going to find things that we disagree with. That's just the nature of human development. It's like going back in time to re-examine ourselves in our earlier lives and making looking back on the decisions that we've made in the past and the things that we've said and the things that we've laughed at. It's like if we don't allow ourselves the space to grow, how honest are we about ourselves and about our society, right? So sometimes we'll confront things like this they're a little bit different, right? Um Christian Williams says, I have a question for later. Do you know why trials back then were longer and why trials are shorter today? Sorry for the off-topic question. Oh, I mean, I don't think that trials have generally gotten shorter. I think it entirely depends on. I mean, there were definitely trials back in the day that were quite short as well. Um, it's just some of these that were uh I mean, the defense just wanted to. I mean, most of this time has been the defense putting on their witnesses. Um, and they had, I guess, a bit more work to do in order to put their case on because it was a bit more complex. Courts will decide how long the case can be based on the complexity of the issues. So if it's a simpler case with simpler arguments, they're going to give it a little bit less time. Um, but yeah. Yeah. So Hope that answers your question there. Revisiting Menendez, as I understand why the defense would have wanted this to rebut prosecutors' arguments that Jose was straight. But yeah, I don't think this would be acceptable now. Yeah, it's interesting. It is interesting. And you have to remember that the litigators here also are, they're doing the same thing that any YouTuber today is doing to market content to viewers, right? We're all sort of triangulating our content to have better titles, better thumbnails. This is a thing that is very commonly known for YouTubers and other social media influencers, is to, getting the click is kind of an important aspect. And so how much focus and attention you put on something being clickbaity. Some people will be much more clickbaity than others. But so, my point is, sometimes the content is going to, in some respects, mirror the general populace, right? Because people are going to click on something that they find interesting. When it comes to trials, the attorneys here are going to want to essentially market their storyline, their framing of the facts, their arguments to the jury that they think is going to reasonably accept this kind of an argument. So, one side's going to win, one side's going to lose, but they're going to oftentimes reflect the attitudes and the social values and things that are generally present at the time that trial happens. So, it could very well be that the attorneys here framed their arguments and brought these kinds of details in a way that they didn't personally agree with, but that they thought that the jury might accept. There's also that possibility. Whether that makes anything better or worse for you, I don't know. It's up to you. But that's just something to also consider as well. So, all right, let's finish up this witness here, because we've only got a little bit more time left with this witness, and then we will be getting to Lyle himself.
Abuse.
I'm going to object to the form of the question, Your Honor.
Overall.
Is that correct?
I heard that the father had been abusing the children and that he was showering with them. That's when I remembered.
Okay, you heard that on the radio.
Yes.
Now, at some point, did you talk to your sister right after you had heard this on the radio?
Not at first.
Not at first.
No.
When was it that you first spoke to her?
Oh, I guess it was maybe a couple of days later, because it was eating at me. I just kept thinking about it. So I talked to her and told her, and she said,
I'm going to object, Your Honor, to what the sister said.
Your next question, please.
Anyway, you had a discussion with your sister.
yes,
Did you ever go to the furniture store in Los Angeles?
I've been there before.
You have been there.
Yes.
Have you seen Noelle Terlesky there?
No, this was a long time ago.
How long ago?
The last time I was there, probably when I did that job for Mark.
In 1988?
Mhm.
Now, you indicated that you did this job for Mark Slotkin, correct?
Yes.
And he was the owner of the house in Beverly Hills at 722 North Elm?
Yeah.
Now, were you aware that he had rented that house?
Yes.
Okay. And were you aware that he had rented the house to Prince and to Elton John?
Yes.
Okay. Now, when you were helping Mark Slotkin move, were all the furnishings in the house?
He had men moving things out, but there was some things that were kept that they were purchasing, the Menendez family.
Certain pieces of
Furniture.
furniture? Were you mainly there to do cleaning? You've indicated that you were in the shower.
Mm-hmm.
Were you cleaning?
Yes.
Was that the main purpose of why you were there for this period of time, that you were cleaning up the house for the new people that would be moving in?
And packing. I was packing for Mark also.
Now, what were you packing at that time?
Oh, different things, from the kitchen to the bathrooms to, I was just removing everything that was his there.
Okay. With respect to the master bedroom, was there a window seat
Yes, there was
In
two.
Two in that master bedroom?
Yes.
Was there some cabinet space underneath the seat?
I don't remember.
Okay. So you don't remember removing anything from the window
Cabinets?
seat, correct?
No.
Okay.
I removed whatever was in the bedroom.
But you don't remember about the window seat?
No.
Okay. Now, if there had been magazines left by either Prince or Elton John that were perhaps in this area, then you wouldn't have known about that, correct?
Your Honor, that's argumentative and calls for speculation.
Rephrase the question as far as the area you're referring to.
Yes. You've indicated a master bedroom, correct?
Yes.
And you've indicated that you saw on one day some magazines that you indicated had males performing sex acts,
Yes.
correct?
Yes.
Now, in that area, was that in the window seat area that you saw that?
Somewhere on top of the window seat, and there was a box on the floor.
Now, you don't know what happened to those magazines afterwards. You didn't see them after you saw them and actually looked at them.
I looked at them, and I went downstairs to check on my son to see what he was doing. And I didn't want him to go in that room because I didn't want him to see it. I was concerned about him viewing any of that.
Now, you actually took a look at these magazines?
Yes.
More than one?
Yes.
How many did you look at?
I just randomly flipped different pages, different magazines to see if they were all the same.
Okay, so you went through every one of the magazines?
Not every one.
But they appeared to be of the same type?
Yes.
Now, the magazines that you say were in the library, you indicated that they were, I believe in the report, that they were near the doors to the library?
Rephrase
Rephrase the question, please.
Where did you see these magazines in the library?
There was like a bar in there, that type of thing, right by there.
Were they in a box or were they just out?
No, they were just
loose?
out.
Were there any other magazines around?
Before there was.
Okay. Did you look at any other types of magazines or just the
Yes.
ones you did? Did you go through all the magazines in the house?
Just the front, just like Architectural Digest, that type of magazine.
Okay, what other types of magazines did you look through?
Just on furnishings and things, just of that nature.
Now, the magazines that you had looked through regarding what you've indicated appeared to be males
Yes.
and sex acts. Were those magazines in the library or were those more like Playboy magazines?
No, it wasn't Playboy.
You know what Playboy is?
Yes.
These magazines that were over by the bar area, where exactly were they? Were they in a neat stack or what?
I can't remember if they were in a neat stack or not.
Okay. But you looked at those as well?
Yes, because it looked like the same thing, so I didn't want my son to go in there either.
Okay, so when you saw them, they were away from the architectural magazines that you had seen. Is that correct?
Yes, because it was the week previous that I was removing those, packing them.
You were removing what?
Magazines.
Okay. And you removed architectural magazines
Yes.
that belonged to whom?
I assumed Mark.
These magazines that you found, or did you clean out the bar?
I cleaned the bar. I cleaned the library. I went through all the rooms, actually, is what I did. And my kids were removing things, and I would check up on them to make sure they were, doing the
With
job.
regard to the bar, did you personally clean out everything in the bar? Were there drawers and shelves behind the bar?
There was a wall unit that I remember, and I opened all the doors. My sister was telling me to go through everything because she did an inventory, and I was to remove everything that was there.
And at that time, you saw these magazines?
No.
Now, how many magazines did you see in the library, ma'am?
I'd say it was small, well, a smaller stack. It was a small stack.
And did you look through every one of them? Just glance
Not
through
every
them?
one of them.
I'm sorry?
Not every one of them.
How many?
Probably about 4 of them.
4 of them? You remember giving the report that you just gave a couple of days ago when you first talked to the defense on September 6, 1993?
Yes.
And do you remember telling them that you looked,
Counsel.
page 3, first paragraph?
See, could I have a, okay.
Did you tell them that you had looked through some magazines in the library and looked at one of them?
No.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at this report?
Objection, Your Honor, witness hasn't indicated. I need to refresh recollection.
Would it refresh your recollection to take a look at the report of your interview with the defense on September 6th, a couple days ago?
Okay.
Okay. May I approach, Your Honor? Okay, does that refresh your present recollection about what you did in the library?
Yes, but I keep thinking about what I saw, and remembering back at that time, and maybe I remember a little more about it,
Okay, so you remember what?
just looking through them because I didn't want my child to go in there and see them.
Now, your children had been in that room,
Yes, they were all over the house.
okay? And they had been cleaning up in the room?
Yes.
I'm going to object, Your Honor, as vague as to when.
Do you know how the magazines got there?
No, I don't.
You don't know whether the defendants brought the magazines there, do you?
Objection, Your Honor, calls for speculation.
Oh,
No, I don't.
there's an implication.
I have nothing further at this time, Your Honor.
Mrs. Dominguez, was it your understanding that Mr. and Mrs. Menendez were living in the master bedroom? Would be living in the master
Yes.
bedroom? Not the sons.
No.
And when you worked at that house for Mr. Slotkin, is it your testimony that you and the others removed everything there that you found?
Yes.
And you even packed up furnishing magazines such as Architectural Digest?
Yes.
And those, to the best of your knowledge, belonged to Mr. Slotkin?
Yes.
You didn't find any pornographic magazines when Mr. Slotkin lived there, did you?
No, I didn't.
Is the first time that you saw these pornographic magazines after the Menendez possessions arrived at the house?
Yes.
Now, do you know when it was that Prince or Elton John rented that house?
No, I don't.
And were you aware that the macho rock band U2 rented the house last?
Yes.
Macho rock
And when
band,
Mr.
you
Slotkin
too.
rented this house, he rented it furnished, did he not?
Yes, he did.
And it had many personal possessions in it of his that he left for his tenants.
Yes.
And it's that in part that you were packing up.
Yes.
And was it your instructions to take everything out of the house before the Menendezes moved in?
Yes.
And with respect to Mrs. Menendez, were you there both to clean and to help unpack?
Yes.
And did you unpack similar looking boxes to the one that had the magazines and videos?
Yes.
Did they all seem to be the same type of box?
Yes.
I have nothing further.
Anything else?
Yes, thank you. Ma'am, you just testified that you're instructed to remove everything from the house. Is that right?
Everything that they didn't purchase, the
Well,
family was purchasing. Mhm.
Which
But
means-
not furnishings because they had men to remove all that.
But didn't you testify on cross-examination that the Menendezes had bought things from Mr. Slotkin, and so those things would presumably be left at the house?
Yes, it was maybe some type of furnishing that
Okay.
was left.
Thank you.
Anything else?
I know you're on.
All right, thank you. You may sit down. You're excused.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. So that's the end of this particular witness. I mean, so the implication from the defense is these belong to Jose. The implication by the prosecution is maybe those were left behind by the previous owner. Maybe those were brought in by the brothers. There's an interesting question, about like how likely it is that these are just going to be like left around by the um Menendezes on, at any point in time, given how I don't know if obsessed is the right word, but how focused they were, let's just say, to use neutral language, on their public image, the image of the family to the public. Kitty talked a lot to teachers about how Erik was, bringing shame upon the family for not performing well in his education, et cetera, et cetera. There's been a lot of testimony about how much attention and energy was put into their appearance to the public as opposed to what was going on behind closed doors. So, there's a question of like, how likely would it be that they would just kind of like allow these things to be like, left out like this? But then you have to consider the fact that when someone is moving, things are going to be all over the place. Things that are normally tucked away, normally organized and placed however people want to place them, are going to be very often, excavated, for lack of a better word, right? So okay, let's see here. I am doing two things at once. We're going to be bringing up this testimony here. We've got Lyle Menendez coming up next. So there is that possibility that things also could have been dug up just because of the fact that they were moving like that. I'm willing to believe that there is a possibility of that kind of stuff, because there's so not it's chaotic. Moving is chaotic. So these things kind of happen. So okay, next we've got Lyle Menendez, and thank you. I think we've got a few trigger warnings up here. Draco Amy, thank you so much for the trigger warning earlier. Oh, right, let's see. Here it is, right here. Trigger warning from her. Trigger warning from Kit Kat. Lyle Menendez testifying soon. Expect sensitive testimony, including sexual abuse or similar. Please take a few moments to gather your thoughts. If you need to step away, do so. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So yes, trigger warning for everybody. We're probably going to get into some tough stuff. I don't know how immediately they're going to be jumping into it, but we shall see. Okay. Let's get going on that, shall we?
And we have both jury panels back in the courtroom and everyone else is present. The defense may call its next witness.
Defense counsel Joseph Lyle Menendez.
Spell your last name.
Joseph Lyle Menendez, Menendez.
Mr. Menendez, are you related to Erik Galen Menendez, who's seated here?
He's my brother.
And were your parents Mary Louise Menendez and Jose Menendez?
Yes,
And were you born January 10th, 1968?
I was.
If you look to the right, you will see various photographs of homes that you lived in. Do you recognize that chart as something you've seen before?
Yeah.
Do you remember the Wexford Terrace home in which you are pictured in a bassinet? The one
No,
in
I
New
don't.
York?
No, I don't.
And do you remember Cedar Grove, New Jersey? The second photograph.
Thank you, Shireen.
No.
Is the first home you remember Hinsdale, Illinois?
Yes.
For the record, could we have the exhibit number, please?
Well, we'll get it later on. That's the exhibit that has photographs of various houses on it.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. Can you remember when you lived in Hinsdale, Illinois?
Yes.
And what do you remember from that point in time? Do you remember your father?
Yes.
What do you remember about your dad from that period in time?
I remember in the winter, and I remember lots of things. I mean,
Do you have any particular good memories of your dad at that point in time?
yes.
Could you tell us one?
I remember the little dog, Tristesse, who was a puppy at that time. I remember her and my dad playing in the snow, and me running out to my dad and jumping on him and playing in the snow. I remember riding my bike.
Did your Aunt Terry and Uncle Carlos live nearby?
They lived across the street.
And did you used to ride your bike over to their house?
Yes.
And do you remember your little brother living in that house with you?
Yes.
And do you remember anything with regard to your little brother and him going over to your aunt and uncle's house?
I remember going over to get him when my mom told me he was over there. He wasn't supposed to be. Go get him and bring him back.
And do you have good memories of your mother also? Can you remember anything good about your mother?
Yes.
What do you remember that's good about your mother?
I remember in this house.
No, not necessarily.
Actually, vague and irrelevant.
I should try to focus a little bit.
Do you have something in particular that stands out in your mind that's a good memory of your mother?
I remember Christmases. Her, she was always up, it seemed, and she would be up when I got up, and she would take us down to open the presents, even though my dad would sleep in. So we got to do that. That was usually a nice day. And I remember her taking care of the birds that would hit the window. Especially in Muncie, the birds would hit the window and be kind of like hurt or wounded in some way. And she would put them in a special cage she had for birds that did that. And she was just amazing with the birds.
Can we just talk about how much pressure is on this man right now while he is testifying? And he's what, like in his early 20s right now. It just the way in which he's able to hold up under pressure. I mean, we haven't seen it here, but undoubtedly the judge would have gone through with him prior to this the rights that he has, the fact that he was waiving his Fifth Amendment right to testify here. Right not to testify. He was waiving his Fifth Amendment right in order to testify. So he's coming across actually quite calm and quite measured, which is like I would imagine that his level of nerves are probably through the roof at the moment. But I think having the attorney that he has right now, Care Bear, Jill's motherly tone is so soothing to listen to and effective and interact. I think, well, for one thing, it speaks to the relationship that he has with his attorney, that he trusts her, that he's able to not fight her, because sometimes that'll happen when the client doesn't trust their attorney as much, then they kind of push back on them while on the stand. And maybe that'll happen at some point here. I don't know, but so far, Jill has a very calming voice for him to sort of guide him through this process. So, I think that is probably part of what is helping him right now. But wow, like I'm just thinking about like the amount of pressure that he has right now to testify. is wild. Okay.
I remember watching.
Did you love your mom and dad?
Yes.
And on August 20th, 1989, did you and your brother kill your mother and father?
Yes.
Did you kill them for money? Is that no?
No.
Ooh.
Did you kill them because you wanted to pay them back for the way they had treated you?
Excuse me, I reject that opinion.
Overall.
No.
Why did you kill your parents?
Because we were afraid.
Do you have a lot of nice memories from your childhood?
No.
Did you get to spend time at your grandparents' house?
Yes.
And was this your father's mother and father? Yes.
Yes.
What was good about being at your grandparents' house?
Everything was good about it. My grandmother was wonderful. And, we stayed in bed all day and watched TV. And, just be like a never-ending stream of foods that we weren't supposed to eat. We watched my grandfather would come in whenever the Untouchables came on. We would watch that, and it would be a big deal. And then we'd go out, and the house was great. She had a magnolia tree outside. We'd climb up that, play with her in that. And there'd be a little patio that was enclosed, and squirrels would be jumping from tree to tree, and my grandfather would laugh and tell us stories, and we'd watch that. We'd go to garage sales with my grandmother.
Was
I think
this,
there's lots of things.
was this different from the life you had in your own home?
It's like a different world from my house.
You said you have some memories of the Hinsdale home. You remember riding your bike and bringing your brother back. You were about 4 years old when you moved out of Hinsdale. Is that right?
Yes.
And then you moved to Muncie. Is that correct?
Yes.
And once you moved to Muncie, did sports become an important part of your life?
Well, they were everything to my dad, and that was my whole life at that time.
And was doing what your father wanted of you important?
That's what made him happy, and that's what I wanted to do.
Why did you want to make him happy?
So he would love me.
What's the first sport you remember getting involved in on an organized basis?
Swimming.
Kind of love a sport. How old were you when you started swimming?
I think 4 years old.
And was this just a matter of going to the pool and swimming for fun, or was this more organized?
No, we had a coach, and my mom would take us. And in the winters, we would go indoors and practice with the older kids. Well, actually, that was just me at that point. Eventually, my brother and I.
And is this something where you had a half-hour lesson every week, or was it more frequent than that?
In the summer, it was every day, and in the spring, probably almost every day. But in the winter, it was whenever the classes were, the practices was just like 3 times a week. And then sometimes my dad would take me on his own.
Now, when your dad would take you on his own, was it the same type of training session that you'd have with swimming teachers, or was it different?
It was very different because swimming, basically the coach just is calling out the laps or the kind of things that you should do, and he might occasionally come over and help someone that's having a problem with a particular stroke or something of that sort. But with my dad, it was very, it was one-on-one, and he'd stay in the pool with me and swim next to me, and sometimes we would play, or it would just be him and I for, usually they gave you an hour. It was like hour free time swimming, and I would take that time to train with my dad.
And were these good times for you or bad times?
Sometimes it was good.
And sometimes it was bad? And what was it like when it was bad?
Well, I didn't really like the swimming. And sometimes he was rough with the swimming.
What do you mean he was rough with the swimming?
Objection around.
I'm sorry?
Objection around.
Overruled. You may ask your question.
It was like they were just drills, and I would swim laps, and sometimes he would just yank me out of the water by my hair, and he would shake you, and he took it very, very seriously. He was training to be an Olympic swimmer at one point, and so he had all kinds of different methods and how to expand your lungs and how long I should be able to hold my breath. And we practiced him holding me under the water, how long I could take it.
What do you mean how long you could take it? Would he say, I'm going to hold you under for 30 seconds and then you go under, or what would that be like?
We would go under, and I would fight him to get air, and then he would give me air. And we would keep doing that, and I would be able to do it less and less time. It was very rough. And
What do you mean you would fight him to get air?
I would just push away from him or pinch him or do whatever I could, hit him underwater. My dad was unaffected by all that, so it didn't.
Jeez.
That's what he wanted me to do. He wanted me to fight to get air so that I could go beyond what I would normally just take if he said stay underwater as long as you could.
He's a child. He's not training to be a Navy SEAL. Jesus Christ. Come on, man. That's just insane.
And this would expand my lungs. And there were other things that made it, for me, rough. And I just was so nervous about swimming. It wasn't just my dad either. Just the practices themselves made me very nervous. The older kids the guy would be blowing whistles, and he would have to dive in. And I didn't like the water. It was always very cold. And it was, for some reason, I didn't like it.
When your dad would hold you under and make you fight to get air, how would you feel when you finally got up to the surface?
Just relieved to get air.
Would you physically have any effects?
I would be crying. This would be very rough, like I said. And
What did your dad do when you'd come up crying?
take a short break. We usually wait 30 seconds or so. We'd do it again.
And how many times would you do these lung expanding exercises?
That way we wouldn't do it too many times. And we would try to do it a couple times a week. And then we would test a couple times a week if I could go farther, like swim a whole lap underwater and then come back, and how far I would get. And we would try to go farther.
And what ages were you when these exercises were going on?
I'm not sure, but by like between like 6 and till about 10, I would say, maybe a little bit longer.
And do you have any other memories of swimming that are painful for you?
The whole thing was very bad for me. And mostly I remember pleading with my mother not to take me, stalling so I would be late, incredible stomach aches, I think from nerves, where I would be nauseous and I would vomit.
What would your mom say when you'd ask her to not make you go?
She would just say, "Get ready, let's go." And she would always threaten me with telling my dad. But when it came to the swimming, I was pretty resistant. I didn't seem to care as much as I did normally. I was pretty crazed about the swimming. It made me so nauseous and nervous. The drilling, the intensity, the underwater stuff was very hard for me. I remember purposely swimming into the wall in practice so that I would be injured, so that the coach would say, "Okay, you can sit in the locker room and miss the afternoon sessions." And I would do all kinds of things anything to get out of it.
Was there any particular reason that swimming was so important? You said your father had trained.
Well, my grandmother, I had heard, was a champion swimmer. Even my dad's sisters, who were less into sports, were very good swimmers. And he was training to be an Olympic swimmer at the time that he had to leave Cuba. And he felt he could have gone all the way. And at least in the beginning, he felt that I could. And then that just clearly wasn't going to be.
Did you start playing soccer at some point in time?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was, I don't know, my grandfather was out there with my dad, working with me by the time I was 5 also.
Did you like soccer?
I really like soccer.
Your Honor, I have 3 pictures I'd like to put up, which have already been marked. They're exhibits 192, 193, and 194. If I may approach.
And also perhaps you can identify the exhibit by the number on that one we've had reference to already.
This is exhibit 148. Can you see them? How long did you play soccer?
Until I was in my 11 years old, between almost 12.
Was your dad as involved in your soccer playing as he was in your swimming?
Yes.
And what kind of involvement did you have? Or did he have with your soccer? Just coming to the games, or was he more involved in that?
No, my dad was there whenever I played soccer, which we usually reserved for when he was there, because it was technical for him. He had a certain way he wanted me to play, and didn't feel it was productive for me just to be kicking a ball around when he wasn't there. So soccer, I waited till he was around.
Now, when you were playing soccer, I presume there was a coach?
Not when I was 5, but eventually there was, like by the time I was 7, I would think.
And once you were on an organized team with a coach, did your dad's involvement stop?
No.
Well, how would your dad behave when you were playing organized soccer?
In practices, he would be very involved, and the coaches would allow that. Pretty much it would be like a private lesson with him, and then the team was playing also. You know, he would be yelling things from the sidelines. And sometimes he would come out and grab me and take me off the field and talk to me, put me back in. And the coaches would pretty much ignore him, both of us. And we would play. And I was getting a lot of extra training. And so I was at a level where it seemed like that was why the coaches would be tolerating that, because I would be one of the better players when the game started, and a big help to the team. So they basically just let my dad do what he wanted to do. And,
Did you get to be friends with the other kids on the team?
no, not really.
Why not?
I just didn't spend any time with them, and my dad didn't want that.
Why not?
It's just part of his philosophy. If I started becoming friendly with these other players, I wouldn't be competitive.
If the if your team lost, would they all get together and go to the pizza parlor afterwards, even though they lost?
They would.
Did
often.
you get to go?
No.
What was your dad's philosophy about that?
He was very belittling of the coach for allowing and the players to be going to pizza parlors to hang out after a loss. And he believed all through sports that the people that win are the ones that hate losing. And the idea that there would be smiles on kids' faces after they lost a game was really, he's just outrageous to him. And if I even went near anybody, or, you know, I had to look, and would purposely look pretty devastated after matches, pretty similar to that picture that my dad would be satisfied, because he would be very angry.
Did your dad take losing a soccer game when you're 8 years old as seriously?
It was very serious to him.
Why?
Well, partly because what I said before, he had his own dreams, and he wanted me to achieve those, and because I was the most important thing in his life, and what I did was serious.
Why were you the most important thing in his life?
I don't know, that's just the way it was.
Did it have something to do with your place in the family, or was your brother as important to him as you were?
No, my brother was unimportant.
How could you
He
tell
pretty
that?
much believed in, well, I did believe that the firstborn was the one that carried the line. I carried my dad and his dad and his dad and his dad's first name.
Which is interesting because Jose himself was not a firstborn. I wonder if he carried a chip on his shoulder about not being the oldest, although he was the only son. So, I mean, maybe it's a very gendered, you know, like as if there's some sort of royal lineage or something.
Joseph or Jose. And that was really all he cared about. And to some degree, I felt that was similar feelings from my grandparents and everybody around, that the focus seemed to be on me. And that might be partly because my dad's focus was on me. But, I'm not really sure why that's.
So you got a lot more attention than your brother, is that right?
I had his complete attention, and I don't think my brother. I didn't even think about my brother. Really didn't even exist for me until later in life. I don't think either of us thought about Erik too much.
So he was just ignored.
He was not completely ignored. Dad would interact with him and be harsh with him at times, play with him at times in ways that he didn't with me. Didn't seem to be very concerned with what was happening with Erik. He might, if he was in a bad mood, he might slap Erik or push Erik away. If he was in a good mood, he might hang out with Erik. But it was different. Like I had to be doing something. I was achieving something or something of importance. And it was very different.
That's tough.
So you had more attention. Would you say there were more expectations of you also?
Definitely.
Was one of the things that your father made decisions about with regard to your sports training the food that you would eat?
Yes.
And throughout your childhood, did his ideas about the proper foods change?
Not too much. I mean, it was always very important to him.
Okay. And what was the instruction with regard to food? Were you told what you could eat?
Yes.
Were you told when you could eat it?
No. I mean, there were some meals he felt it depended on what was happening that day. If there was a practice, it would be 3 hours before. He wouldn't tolerate 2.5 hours. It would be 3. And then there would be certain foods involved. And if there wasn't a practice and I was just going to school, I would just know the things that I had to stay away from or I had to eat. Or
Such as?
Stay away from sugar, dairy products. That changed because there were times when dairy products were a big thing. It depended on what he was reading, whatever was in the literature. If it was the Eat to Win diet, if it was something else. Usually he had books that would list what you have for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and then like strategies for how early. But he changed his philosophy a lot because I remember him reading about Pancho Gonzalez would fast during a tournament. And so I did that for a period of time where I would just not eat for 12 hours at a time, have a small meal, not eat all day again. That wasn't working very well, so we switched.
How old
I can
were you
imagine.
when you were doing the Pancho Gonzalez fasting program?
13, when I was just becoming real competitive.
And you were playing a lot of tennis at that time, I take it.
Yes,
How many hours?
It was only tennis at that point.
How many hours a day were you playing tennis?
At 13?
Yes.
Six. Probably like 40, 45 hours a week.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear. 4 or 5 hours?
45, 40 hours a week.
40 to 45 hours a week? And this is and you're 13 and you're going to school also? Yes?
Yes.
Now, did you sit down and talk with your dad about these food programs and sort of decide together what you were going to do in terms of your diet? Or did he decide?
I could pick out foods from the different categories.
When you said he wanted you to stay away from sugar, from junk food, that was an important theme with him, I take it.
Yes.
And if you violated that rule, would he enforce the rules?
Well, sometimes I violated the rule, and he would enforce the rules.
Was there a situation where you bought some food during the time you were playing soccer that you weren't supposed to buy?
Yes.
How old were you?
I was about 11, almost.
And what happened?
Is it at the Lawrenceville Deli? At the Lawrenceville Deli, we stopped there routinely on the way from or to the soccer fields from where our house was in Pennington. And my dad would be buying the things he felt he wanted for me. And the guy behind the counter was very friendly. They'd had the place forever, and he knew me every time I came in my soccer clothes. Basically, he sneaked me in a bag, some pastries and cookies and stuff. He just sort of put it in with everything else my dad was buying. And I took it out when my dad wasn't looking.
Did your dad find him?
He found them on me outside the store.
Were you eating them?
I was eating them.
And what did your dad do?
He just grabbed him out of my hand, and he just grabbed me by the neck. He just punched me in the stomach.
Jesus.
Did he say anything?
No, he dragged me to the car, and I don't believe that he said anything. And I knew what was obvious.
Excuse me, Your Honor, could you ask the witness to keep your voice up?
Yes, if you could speak up a little bit.
The picture that's up on the board with you in the yellow shirt, is that in the back seat of a car?
Yes.
And is that your father with you?
Yes.
And does that scene look familiar to you?
Yes.
After you, is that a shirt of a soccer team you played for?
That's the Swiss Bakery and Deli.
And that was the soccer team?
Yeah, that's one of the house league teams, not the all-star team that this picture is in here. There would be like 16 teams in the house league. Lots of boys would play, and myself. And then they would pick certain players to play on like an all-star team. This was one of the house league games. And we would wear the T-shirt of the sponsor. That would be the sponsor.
And after you played soccer, would your dad talk to you about what your performance had been?
Yes.
And was it supportive, like you did a great thing today, or I'm really proud of you, or what would be the tone of those conversations?
No, he didn't believe in that. We worked on different aspects of the game, what I could have done. There was always things that I could have done much better. Depended if we won or lost. If we had won, if I'd scored a goal or so, and usually in these games, I would score a goal or do something significant probably, and we would just focus on the other things that I should have done better. It wouldn't be so bad.
You said your dad didn't believe in things like that when I asked you if he said complimentary things. What do you mean he didn't believe in things like that?
He just didn't believe in praise. He just felt that you just have to keep going to the next level of play so we could get to where we wanted to go. And that wasn't going to happen with wasting time, patting ourselves on the back, and just losing our focus on what we had as a goal. And so I never looked for praise.
Did you feel like there was a lot of pressure to live up to your dad's expectations?
Tremendous pressure.
Did you think you could ever meet his expectations?
No. And I don't think he felt I could either.
Here, and I have 3 additional pictures which I've shown to the prosecution that I'd like to have marked as next in order.
All right, starting at 216 would be the next exhibit.
At some point, did you start playing tennis?
Yes.
And how old were you when you started playing tennis?
I started late, but I started about 6.
put some photographs up here?
Yeah.
Do you recognize these photographs?
Yeah.
What do you recognize them to be?
That's John Camp, my coach at that time, and that's me on the right. I don't know who the other was. Well, that looks like 6 years old. I'm just starting.
And is this were these the first formal tennis lessons you had?
Yes.
And did your dad work with you in the park before that?
Yes.
How long before you were taking these formal lessons in 6 did you start practicing with your dad in the park?
We practiced for a long time. He wanted me to learn the basics the way he wanted me to learn the basics before I went to another coach who started me a different way. And he also wanted me to get to a certain skill level where I could play with the older kids and didn't waste time with the very basic stuff that some of the coaches wanted to do, depending on the coach. But he was a really nice, softer guy and took the kids through slowly. So my dad, because we used to watch, we'd go over and we sort of watch at first because my dad would play. And he decided that we would work first on the public courts and get to a certain level, and then I could join into these drills that he really wanted me to be involved in. So you
were here when your cousin Alan Anderson testified.
Right.
About playing tennis at the park. You remember that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes.
And he indicated when you first started playing, you couldn't hold the racket with one hand. Is that correct?
That's right.
Why?
Well, I was 6, and I wanted to use a junior racket. I'm actually using a junior racket in that picture, which John had at the club. And those are the types of things that John would do that my dad hated. He wanted me to use a full-size racket, and
You say he wanted you to use a full-size racket. Who wanted you to use a full-size
my
racket?
dad wanted me to use a full-size racket. And we would wrap the grip up a little bit higher, and I would hold the racket choked so that I could hold it
With 2 hands?
with 2 hands on both sides.
Were you too small to hold it with one hand?
Yes.
During the course of your playing tennis, did you have a series of coaches?
Yes.
Did you make a list at one point in time of all the coaches you could think of?
Yes.
And about how many were on there? Did you have 5 coaches or 10 coaches or 20 coaches?
No, I could remember like about 55
What?
coaches. But I
That's
know I missed a
insane.
lot because they kept coming. Another one would come back to me every once in a while.
Would you have more than one coach at a time?
Yes.
That's confusing.
And did you get to form any close relationships with any of these coaches?
Some of them. I mean, not really. I did have a close relationship to some degree with Brad Warner because I went to him for a long period of time. This guy was very nice to me because he would stand up to my dad somewhat, but I didn't really know him in any way.
Did your dad encourage you to get close to your coaches?
No, we went through coaches, just it was high turnover with coaches. And if one started getting too friendly and talked to my mom too much, he was gone. And we just get another one.
And what if you started to get close?
Rephrase the question, please.
Who picked the coaches? Did you get to say, I like this coach, I'd like to keep him, or was this a
No.
decision your dad?
Jose made that decision. Let's be real.
No, my dad would, either my dad or my mom would find the coach, and then I would have my first lesson, and that's when I would meet him.
And during your early years, say before you were 10, how many hours a day would you say, or how many hours a week would you say you were playing tennis before you were 10?
When I was 10. Well, we played a lot more in the summer than in the winter. In the summer, we would split it up between the 3 sports, and I would play a little each day. And I would hit tennis almost every day. Certainly by the time I was 7, I was playing almost every day. And really, my dad was focusing on tennis and soccer because I was having a very hard time with swimming. And I might play several hours in a row, maybe like 4 hours. And then we would switch and play some soccer, or he would go over a tape. He had soccer tapes. And then maybe we would go to the pool because we'd be hot and sweaty. And then we would train in the pool for some swimming. During the school year, it was regimented because we had court time, swimming time. And I think I played tennis like 3-4 times a week, sometimes more on the weekends. And then there would be times when my dad would just decide I'd play tennis all day. And I'd do that.
In addition to the playing of tennis, you said he had tapes. Would he go over tapes with you in the various sports?
Yes, we had lots of tapes on each sport.
And would you just sit down together, father and son, and watch the tapes, or would this be some sort of a teaching session?
There would be training tapes. They would be, I used to go to a soccer camp, Patamale soccer camp, and they would furnish us with tapes there. They would have tapes of South American players giving instruction, Pele, other well-known players. I don't remember the names, but they would also have some basic American soccer instruction tapes, which weren't too good. But then we would have the tennis tapes. That would be the most extensive because he would tape all the matches, the great matches, and he would have parts segmented for me to watch, or games, or he would have the slow motion button and we would watch the service motion or whatever it was. He also had specific, like they were called Cybervision tapes made by Stan Smith, Bob Lutz, which would actually be like computerized stroking tapes and actual play that you only see like dots of the body. And I would imitate that. And we would just go through it instructionally.
And when you say you would imitate it, while the tape was going on, would you be doing something or just sitting there? Or?
No, we would be watching intently, and he would be telling me, see that, you know, and sometimes I would have the button. He would say, go back, and he would go over to the TV and he would point to the form, see how his elbow's bent. Your elbow drops too much. You have to keep it up. A million things that would just be technical oriented.
And when you would watch these tapes, would this be a 15-minute session or something longer?
Sometimes. A lot of times, like in Pennington, we would run in from practice. If I had done something wrong, he would say, come on. We would go into the house, turn on the tape, and he'd find the segment that pertained to whatever I had done wrong or he wanted me to do. Then we would go back out. Other times it would just be at night. If it was raining and we were supposed to play outside or something like that, any kind of filler time, we would just watch the tapes. We watched the same tapes over and over and over.
Do you have time to go play with the kids in the neighborhood?
Probably not.
I very occasionally played the baseball on the cul-de-sac with a guy named Jerry, older kid, who let me play. And I knew another kid across the street named Tom, who was more friends with Erik, or they would occasionally play or something. But pretty much we weren't allowed off the property. And we stayed in the backyard, which had fences.
Did you have other kids come over and play with you, come in the house? And
We have Jerry came in the house occasionally until the dog attacked him.
was this in Muncie?
Yes,
And was the dog who attacked him Con?
yes,
And was Con the relative of the dog who bit you on the face?
yes.
You have a scar on your right cheek? From that dog bite?
I was wondering
So
about
after Con
that.
attacked Jerry, was that the end of Jerry coming in the house?
Yes, it was. He was just traumatized by it because the dog was let in, and this dog was ferocious. If it smelled another person in the house, it just tore down the stairs, and he was playing ping pong with me. It came running down the stairs and just bit him in the groin,
Oh,
and it was this huge dog fight, and my mom separated Jerry and the dog and got the dog by the jaws, and Jerry left, and I almost never saw him again.
Jerry, you mean?
Yeah.
The dog stayed with you, though?
Yeah.
Did you eventually have to get rid of the dog?
Eventually, the police said that we had to destroy Con because of various violent incidences with the dog and other dogs and other people.
nowadays that I think there would be a concern about civil lawsuit. Lot of concerns about that. Yeah. I think I don't know, not to say that doesn't happen anymore, but I mean, this kind of family with this level of wealth would definitely be a ripe like target for a lawsuit like that if something had happened. Like they have pockets essentially that would be able to make it worthwhile for some other plaintiff to file one against them.
And my dad didn't want to do that. And he had this idea that if he gave it away for a while, he might be able to get it back when things calm down. So we gave it to a family that had, I think, much older kids. I think they were college kids or whatever on like a farm type of. And then I heard that the dog had been destroyed eventually for more problems.
Poor dog.
Getting back to your tennis. When you would be playing, when you would be practicing,
I just said poor dog. Also, obviously, poor Jerry was his name. Goes without saying. I mean, obviously, if he just happened to be in the house and is attacked by the dog, even though he's a guest of Lyle there playing ping pong, that's awful. But also, very often dogs will be the way that they are because of the experiences that they've had and the training that they've had. So, I feel very bad for the dog and for the life that dog had as well.
would your father be there participating in your practices?
In tennis?
Yes.
Yes. Not every time, but most of the time my dad was there. Anytime he could be there, he would be there.
And when you were playing in tournaments, was your father there?
Yes, or he would fly in, and a lot of times I remember I would start the first couple points, and then I'd see my dad show up in a business suit, having just arrived.
Would you be glad to see him?
Yes.
Did he make it more fun for you to be in tournaments?
No.
Why not?
Well, whenever my dad was around, it was very heavy pressure, and I preferred to be just with the coach. But for some reason, when I was away from my dad, I had trouble playing. And so I remember the semifinals of one big championship tournament with a rival that I had beaten earlier in the spring in front of my dad easily. This was a big match. There were like 50 people watching, and I lost 6-0, 6-0. And my coach looked at me like, oh, my God, how are we going to tell your dad? He was like pale, and I was sometimes I just couldn't play if my dad was not there, or and I don't know, sometimes it was the nerves of just having to explain to him the match.
What do you mean, explain to him the match? If your father wasn't there, would you have to tell him about the match?
Every game, exactly how the match progressed.
Now, when you say exactly how the match progressed, would you call your father at work or see him when he got home? How would you tell him?
I call him immediately. He wanted to know immediately.
So would he be at work?
He would normally be either at home, or sometimes he would be, I guess at tournaments he was mostly at work, but I call him after practices, and I would be playing late, and he would get home and expect a call from either the coach or from me. Or we reach him at the office. His secretary would always say he's out to lunch, he's busy. As soon as he found out it was my tennis coach, he just walked in, and then he'd want everything, exactly the temperament.
Tell me what you would tell him.
He would talk to the coach first, and I could hear my coach saying, he did real well. I know it was a close match, depending on whatever happened. Just describe the match, kind of, and then he'd say, your father wants to talk to you, and Dad would ask me to have the coach leave the room so he could talk to me in private, and he would say, tell me what happened. I heard this, what happened. I want to know, why did this happen this way? As far as, to give you examples, like he would say, you elected to serve first. And I'd say yes. And he'd say, okay. So did you go through the first 3 games like we arranged? Because he would have exactly what I was supposed to do for the first almost 25 points, where I would just have a set strategy. Sometimes it would go off during the point, but pretty much I would either serve and volley to the deuce court, stay back on the ad court. Then if it was 30-all, he'd have different strategies. And I'd explain to him how I followed those strategies, and he'd want to know why they didn't work out. And I'd do my best to explain in a way that didn't admit that my backhand was off or that I wasn't concentrating or things like that.
Now, would these be conversations that would last 2 or 3 minutes, or how long would you be explaining in detail what happened?
An hour and a half. About an hour and a half, because we'd also then have to go into what was happening tomorrow. And he'd want to know exactly what I ate that day. Maybe it was the food that affected the match. And I would write out what I ate every time I was away from him, so we could chart whether, only bananas and so on in the morning seemed to be a winning percentage and so on. And I actually purchased a computer at one point that you could plug all these things in, and it would give you the percentages of what happened when you ate this or when you tried this strategy or how many unforced errors. Very, very, very
That's
technical
wild.
with my dad.
At one point, were you the number 1 player in the Middle States Tennis Association?
Yes.
Now, what is the Middle States Tennis Association? What area does that cover?
That's the 5 states, most in New York, New Jersey, Pennsylvania, West Virginia, and Delaware.
And how old were you when you were number 1 in that area?
I was 17, I think. My first year of the 18 and unders.
So everybody eligible to play in that would have been 18 or younger.
Right.
And you were 17 when you won.
Right.
And do you remember when you won that? Do you remember that period of time?
I remember the year.
Do you remember, was your dad proud of you? Had you finally done enough?
He was proud of me, but by the time I could get to be number 1, we were thinking nationally, nationally, I was not where he wanted me to be. So we didn't really worry about like the 5 states thing. We concentrated on the nation, what the other players were doing. And I was having trouble nationally.
Maybe the reason is because they weren't being abused by their parents. I don't know. Just a thought.
And that was always on his mind.
So this wasn't a great moment for you then? I mean, making a #1 ranking in the Middle States Tennis Association was not that important. Did it seem to be?
Rephrase the question, please.
Yeah. Did it seem to be important? I mean, did your dad seem to be real happy about this?
He really didn't say much about it. It just happened. The rankings came up. I noticed I was #1, but again, we were thinking nationally. It was like, so what? And yeah, that was an upsetting year because we had lost again, Family of the Year tennis for New Jersey to a family called the Leshleys, and my dad was pissed. And my mother called in and to complain and the whole thing because my brother had a very good year that year also. But we lost that, so he was very upset. He basically was upset with my brother for not having been #1 also, which would have clinched it. And he was like 5 or something, 4 or 5.
So your brother was #4 or 5. If he'd been #1, would have clinched it, mean you would have gotten the Tennis Family of the Year?
Right.
Why don't you pick a point here when it's convenient, we'll take a break.
One more question. And then
Okay.
we'll take a break. Did your sports activities seem to take up all of your dad's free time?
It took up any time he wasn't working. Yeah.
And did your mother ever express any resentment about that?
Oh, yes, many, many times.
What would she say?
She would say many things. She would say that I ruined her life. And she would explain to me why and how I ruined her life.
What would
And,
she tell you about why and how you ruined her life?
well, if she wasn't in a tantrum and she was just speaking normally, she would just explain all the things that she could have been: an actress, broadcasting. I learned about her aspirations with disappointments with not being a child actress and wanting to go on in some acting or broadcasting sense. And she told me that she had a job in New York to be a hostess at a restaurant, that she said she could make almost $50,000 a year, and that then suddenly she had gotten pregnant, that she had not wanted to get pregnant, that my dad had then forced her, gave her an ultimatum.
Wasn't she a teacher in New Jersey? What makes her think that she would have been some Hollywood star or some professional in broadcasting? I mean, yeah, her husband was in the entertainment business, but what planet was she living on? That's just insane.
Ultimatum: either you leave or you stay home with my son and quit. And so she chose to stay home, and essentially her life was pretty much ruined from that point on. But then we would have more discussions about how much money was being spent on my tennis, all my dad's time on my tennis, who cares? And then I would hear about the lessons she couldn't have, the things that she couldn't have. And then there would be other times when she was in a tantrum. And then it would just come out very, in a rage.
What would come out in a rage?
She would be throwing things and screaming and flailing and wanting and trying to hit you and saying that you're a bastard. And she cursed a lot. And then wait till your dad gets home. I'll tell him the things that you didn't do today. And I wish you were never born. And why can't you be like your brother? and what's the matter with you? And then I would try to say something. She would say, shut up. I don't want to hear it. You're stupid. I hate you.
How old were you when you heard things like, I wish you were never born?
So, 7.
That's the end of that area.
Jesus.
Okay, we'll take a recess, ladies and gentlemen, and we'll resume
Yeah, that's a
at
good time for a
15 minutes
recess.
after the hour. Don't discuss this case with anyone. Don't form any final opinions about it.
No
and we'll
child should
resume
hear
at
that from
3:15.
from their mother. Good Lord.
And all the jurors are back in court, and we're ready to proceed. The witness is on the witness stand. You may proceed with your question.
That's awful. I just like even look, a lot of mothers deal with the way in which their lives change completely overnight, seemingly. When they have children, every mom, it seems like, struggles with it to some degree at some point because it just changes your life entirely. And yeah, maybe it causes you to go down a different path than you had previously anticipated many times. But that's like, but to one time tell your child that you wish that they had never been born is one time too many. 7? God, what a cruel woman. Just absolutely cruel.
Lyle, as you were growing up, and I'm directing your attention now to when you were living in the Muncie house and then later in the Pennington house, were there pornographic films that were made available to you and your brother?
Yes.
And where did these films come from?
Yeah, that's interesting. We're visiting Menendez. I think Kitty possibly had untreated postpartum depression. I think Kitty had a lot of things that weren't treated. I don't know exactly what they were. I'm not a you know, a professional in the medical field, let alone psychology. So I wouldn't be able to say, but it's clear that she had a number of issues that were not being addressed. So oof.
My dad brought him home with other videos.
And would you and your brother sneak and watch them, or how would you see them?
No, my dad we would just watch them together.
With your dad? And what's the earliest age that you remember being shown films like this?
I remember some films in Muncie at the end. Mostly I remember in Pennington House.
And what types of things would be portrayed in these films?
It was mostly violence, sexual violence. I remember a whole bunch of the films. There would be films with gang rapes. There was one film centered around a woman that was riding her bike and was abducted and brought to a forest and gang raped. And there was another different film where there was three females attacking another female, and the same in the men's locker room with 3 guys and another guy, violent sexual acts. Another film, it was like a film within a film where this filmmaker was making a lot of money selling these violent sexual pornography that he would take place in a red room. And then the premise of the film is they eventually find out that the killings and the sexual violence in the red room is real, and that's why the films are so good. And there were lots of them.
Did your father show these films to other people beside you and yourself and your mother?
Only as like just shock value.
How do you mean? Who would he show them to?
He showed them to Um, that I remember Peter Goldsmith. He showed them to the neighbors in the Pennington house when they would come over at times. It seemed like he would tell me in advance he was going to do this, and it was more to embarrass my mother than anything else. But he would just put on this video, and people would sort of settle in, and then he'd shock them. He showed them for some of my friends that would come over every once in a while. He'd just throw one on, and it really wasn't very bothered by him, and we would watch them together.
Do you ever take photographs of you and your brother?
Yes.
And what would the circumstances be in which you would take photographs?
So Carrier did give a warning earlier that there would be some images that we might not want to show on the screen. So I am going to be, if they pan over to some images, I'm going to first take the court stream off the screen until I've checked to see if it's okay. I don't want this to get taken down or struck or anything. So just so you guys know, if you see just me, I'm gonna err on the side of caution and then only reveal it if it looks like it's okay. Just so you guys know. Yikes. This is probably going to be a little bit rough.
He would take photographs of us, our private parts.
God. And would he have you come in and pose for these photographs? Or how would that happen?
I would just, if we were in the showers or bathtub or changing, he would just use the same camera that my mother used, and then he would come in, take just a photograph or two, and he wouldn't say anything. And then he would leave.
Do you ever show you those photos?
No.
Excuse me. Here, I have some photographs. I have shown to the district attorney and Kim Martin. Please permission.
How many are there? And just for the record, what are the markings that you put on there?
We have, may I do it from up here so I can show it to
Yeah.
you all at the same time?
Okay, please refer to,
Mr. Menendez, I'm showing you a Kodak color prints envelope with the number 219 on it. Would you take a look at that? Do you recognize the handwriting on the front?
That's my mother's.
And what does it say?
Erik's birthday, November 1976.
And in November 1976, how old would you have been?
8. That's the Muncie house, 4 Harlow Lane, Muncie, New York.
is there anything in that envelope at this
It's
time?
empty at
Okay.
this time, Your Honor.
All right.
The next would be,
Did you want to mark that envelope?
it's marked 219, Your Honor.
All right.
The next would be 220, which is a envelope containing negatives. Next is a series of small photographs. Which we marked 221A through G.
So she's establishing the photographs to be admitted as evidence.
And then we have enlargements of those photographs, which we have marked 222 through 233.
So far, they're too small to really be able
We
to
have a
tell what they
proof
are.
sheet of the negatives, which we've marked as 220, which is marked as 234. Mr. Menendez, have you been shown this proof sheet already?
Yes.
Okay, so now she's placing them on the board, and okay, we're taking it off the screen.
Your Honor, I now have the enlargements which go in order off of the proof sheet off the negative. Mr. Menendez, do you recognize this photograph?
She placed the negatives up on the board, and you can
Yes.
kind of see some things.
Who are
I
the people in
think
that photograph?
definitely erring on the side of caution.
Mom and Dad, myself. the Baralt family, children, and Aunt Terry and Uncle Carlos.
Could you just identify that for the record so that we don't have?
222, Your Honor.
All right.
Okay, so now she's placing another one on. Camera's currently on Lyle, but in case it shifts over, I want to err on the side of caution.
Showing you what we've marked as 223. Do you recognize that photograph?
Yes.
And who is that?
That's me.
His expression right now looks very much like he's so uncomfortable. I mean, can you imagine how exposed you must feel? Oh, Jesus. Yeah, no, this is definitely,
224?
you're seeing everything
Eric.
on that child body. We are not showing this at all. Dear God. Thank you for the warning, Care Bear. Thank you.
225?
What was the answer?
I don't know.
It's nothing, Your Honor. Nobody can recognize. It's just the next
There is
photo on the
no need for a parent to be taking these kind of photos.
$226?
That's Eric and myself and some other boys.
You have to
And-
speak up.
Some other boys and Eric and myself. Sorry.
And do you recognize some mark on your brother?
The birthmark. The birthmark on his right wrist. It's a large,
So you can tell that,
large brown.
that the image doesn't show his face, but it shows a birthmark, which is how you can tell that it's him.
227?
That's my father and Eric at a birthday party.
So there's also a photo of some boys together. They're all, it's not a nude photo. They're like fully clothed. It looks like they're just kind of hanging out. Looks like maybe like a pizza party or something like that.
228?
That looks like the same party with Eric and myself.
Yeah. So now they're at like a dinner table.
229?
Looks like a pizza party. I'm not sure
The same
why these
picture, I
fit in
think,
with
but darker.
the others.
230?
The same picture, basically.
231?
Looks like my mother in the background, lower half of her, and
Igloo Puff,
my
that's a good
brother with
point.
a donut.
How many
232.
explicit photos are
That's
in there,
Eric.
Dater?
How do you recognize him?
I'd say there's 3.
Birthmark on his right hand.
Oh, now there's
And
more.
233?
That's the little dog I was talking about, Tristesse.
Your Honor, may I take a moment and put the photos up?
Yes.
Yeah, this is definitely, yeah. Yeah, it shows mom knew. Yeah. And I think she also wrote on one of the images when Jill was first bringing these up to Lyle, you know, there were some that were like just on the film strip and some that had been developed, and Kitty had written on the back of them that it was like Erik's birthday. So it's like, so, you know, she had seen those, she had gone through those. So God. So there's a bunch more that are like from this pizza
Now, when
party.
you said that your dad would come in periodically and just take pictures of you, the 2 photographs here we've marked, one which you've identified as yourself and the other one as Erik, which are children without clothes, also appear to be children without heads. Is that correct?
Yes.
And when he would take photographs of you of this nature, would he seem to be directed at taking photos of your faces?
No.
Or would he?
He would take photographs of your genital area, the lower half of your body, or you're bending over.
Okay, so right
or
now they're just showing
different
Lyle.
parts
So
of your
I'll,
positions.
if the camera starts to pan again,
I never really
I'll change
knew.
it.
Because you never saw them afterward, or? Is that
Which
yes?
answer?
He would be focused on those areas, but I didn't see I've never seen these pictures.
It's today? the first time you've seen these pictures?
So yeah, just to describe, it's like you see body but no face. It's like it looks like objectification, right? It's not, it doesn't appear to be, I mean, like you could, maybe argue that there are some potential reasons why, an image might be taken for the doctor or something, if there's something wrong, to show like, hey, is this normal? I don't know, maybe, but it's like that is still ugh. There's also a question, yeah, Draco Amy, who developed the photos, because that was at a time where it wasn't just like today we've got digital photos, right? We've got, where you can just take a photo and, on your phone and then just upload it directly, or, save it away in some digital file, and that's all on your own. No one else is involved. But back in the day, you had to get those developed by someone. Um, you know, it also could have been that someone who was developing those photos didn't necessarily look at them when they were developing them, or maybe they did and were like just like freaked out, like what do you do when you see something like that happening, and if you, especially if you don't really know who that person is, or I don't know, I could see a lot of people being like, I don't want to get involved in this kind of thing, like that's very creepy, very strange. But someone could have those photos developed, call the police, tell them like there's something weird going on here, and maybe you guys should look into this person who is having these photos developed, but not everyone wants to get involved in other people's lives. So sometimes that happens, right? Ugh. But what's right and wrong is, maybe not necessarily that. Okay, let's
Say yes.
continue.
Yes.
Did your dad used to have talks with you about sex between men?
Yeah, fair point about
Yes.
Jimmy Peach.
And what types of situations would he talk to you about?
He would talk about the bonding between men, going into battle or in competitions, mostly with regards to battle and history, and that sexual interaction and touching and hugging, but also sex was throughout history was something that men that had gone into battle had done together. Had me read passages about it.
What do you mean, had you read passages about it? What would he give you to read?
Excuse me, Your Honor, can we have a time for it, please?
Yes.
What time are we talking about in your life?
Talking about when I was 6.
It's a little bit young to
What
be
would he have you
talking
read?
about those kinds of themes, in my opinion.
He had history books with passages outlined, various battles and strategy. But in terms of on this subject, there would be particular passages about Greeks, soldiers having had sex with each other before they went into battle as a way
Handing in
of
the opposite direction.
bonding with each other so they have a stronger connection. And he would talk about the same thing with regards to sports and he and I.
And did he talk about fathers and their firstborn sons in this regard?
Not in this. Not that that's what I'm not understanding the question.
Did he talk about, you said he talked about soldiers and having sex between them as a bonding mechanism.
Yes.
Did he talk about teachers and students?
No.
Did he?
Oh, yes, he did actually. Not teachers. He talked to me about I don't know, they were like lecturers or traveling lecturers, professors, and they would have arrangements with very close special students, young boys, and they would have sex and they would touch each other.
And did he talk about it with regard to fathers and sons?
Kurt, you came in at a very interesting time. Hope you're doing well. Miss you too, friend. Yeah, we're knee deep in some uh in some weird stuff. They showed some images that Jose had taken of the boys, but it's not it's not the kind of photos that a parent usually takes of like, hey, like my kids are in the bathtub, and they happen to be naked or whatever. It's like it's very purposefully cropped, it looks like, to be an objectification of the very, very, very young body. It's like centered on certain areas. I didn't show the images because of YouTube reasons, and also just uncomfortable, whatever. But Court TV is showing it for the full. I mean, in these kinds of cases where these allegations are present, it's like you have to look at these things. That's why these cases are really, really tough. But yeah, this is some really bad shit. I'm not gonna lie. I'm not gonna lie. Like this is some very strong evidence in support of them having been abused by their father. The existence of these images in the way that they exist and have been taken, and it's just ugh, ugh. It's yeah. It, in my opinion, is some of the strongest supporting evidence for the proposition that Jose abused his sons sexually throughout their childhood.
He talked about it with regard.
Why did they put that on TV? You have to remember this is one of the first trials to be streamed, or streamed. They didn't have streaming, but to be publicly broadcast. So, I mean, they I don't know. I mean, they probably were just like, well, we're going to show this in its complete entirety. I don't know, or maybe certain channels, moderated this or something as it was publicly broadcast. I'm not sure, but when it comes to Court TV, Long Crime being there, they're going to show the images that are in the courtroom because they're providing full access of what's going on in the courtroom. I mean, it kind of goes back to like the purpose of broadcasting in the first place, is to make sure that the public has a right to be there and to see these things, to examine the way that our judicial system is functioning. Obviously, some cases where there's a lot of sensitivity, courts will decide that the cameras are not allowed in the courtroom. But yeah, ooh, rough. And yeah, Kurt, it's tough. I'm okay. I'm okay. I'm managing this. I just feel so awful for the brothers. Like I am at this point, basically, yeah, I'm convinced they've been absolutely abused by their father. Ugh, awful. But okay, we are continuing on, and actually, this might be. I was going to get to part 2 of Lyle's testimony, but we've been taking enough breaks here that it might go on for too long if I get to the point where I wanted to. So I might just end it after the end of part 1 today. Also, it's been very heavy. So we've got about 10 more minutes of testimony here. So, okay.
To our relationship as being very special and our family history with the firstborn and the father.
And what was special about the relationship of the firstborn and the father?
that it was special, and that that was really all that mattered, was the firstborn, and that the sons should do what the fathers say, and then they grow up and they become like the father, and the father teaches them, molds them, and someday me and my son do the same.
And between the ages of 6 and 8, did your father have sexual contact with you?
Yes.
And how did it start?
Just started with, after sports practices, he would massage me, and we would have these talks, and he would show me, and he would fondle me, and he would ask me to do the same with him, and I would touch him, and we would undress.
Where would this
And it
take
was-
place?
In my bedroom.
And how often would this happen?
Like 2 or 3 times a week.
And for how long did this happen?
Not too long. It began to change.
When did it begin to change?
I'm not sure exactly at what time, but almost close to when I was 7.
And how did it change?
Just became more involved.
What do you mean more involved?
We would be in the bathroom, and he would put me on my knees. He would guide me, all my movements, and I would have oral sex with him.
Did you want to do this? At some point, did he do some other things to you?
Holy shit.
Yes.
What else did he do to you?
He used objects,
What kind of objects?
a toothbrush, and some sort of shaving utensil brush.
And what would he do with the toothbrush?
Oh my God.
Well, in the bedroom, we'd have what we called object sessions, and just slide my pants down or take my pants off. Sometimes it'd be for a short period of time, sometimes longer. Just lay me on the bed and he'd have a tube of Vaseline, and he just played with me.
And was there some point in time when he decided to use something besides the toothbrush?
Yes.
And did he try to anally penetrate you with something else?
He did.
And what was it?
He raped me.
Oh my God.
Did you cry?
Yes.
Did you bleed?
Yes.
Were you scared?
Very.
Did you ask him not to?
Yes.
How did you ask him not to?
I just told him, I don't. I'm sorry. I just told him that I didn't want to do this and that it hurt me. And he said that he didn't mean to hurt me. And he loved me.
Was that important to you, that he loved you?
Yes, very. But I still didn't want to do it.
Did you tell your mom?
Yes.
What did you say to your mom?
I told her to tell Dad to leave me alone. And he keeps touching me.
What did your mom say?
She told me to stop it and that I was exaggerating and that my dad has to punish me when I do things wrong. And she told me that he loved me.
Oh my God.
Did you ever tell anybody else?
Yeah, we've got like 5 minutes left, but if this is too much, absolutely do what you need to do. I see some folks having a hard time with it. It's really hard to watch and hard to listen to. So I completely understand. Do what you need to do, guys. This is just tough. I mean, even watching Erik watch this right now, how he's like biting his hand. He's definitely like self-soothing right now. Oh, God.
When?
Did you ever tell anybody else when you were a child? You heard Diane Vandermolen testify. Do you
Yes.
remember telling her?
No.
Did you complain to your cousin Alan?
No, not about that.
Just about punishment. As a child, did you ever tell anybody else what had happened with your dad?
Yes. As a child, no.
Why not?
I was afraid, and my dad didn't want me to.
What did he tell you about telling people?
He just said that it was our secret, that bad things would happen to me if I told anybody.
This is what happens with these kinds of abuse cases. This is often what they would say. Ugh.
And I told him I never would.
How old were you when this stopped?
8.
So during the time between 6 and 8, when this was going on, did you tell your brother? Did you do something to your brother?
Yes.
What did you do to your brother?
I took him out to the woods whenever I felt, I don't know, I took him out sometimes, and I took a toothbrush also, and I played with Erik in the same way.
Oh.
And I'm sorry.
Fuck. That's some real pain right there on Erik's face.
stopped for you with your dad when you were 8? When you were about 13, did you think that it might be happening to someone else?
Yes,
And who did you think it was happening to?
Erik.
And did you do something about it?
Yes,
What did you do?
I talked to my dad.
What did you say to your dad?
I told him that I knew what was going on with him and Erik, and I heard noises, and that I wanted him to leave Erik alone.
And what did he say to you?
He told me that Erik was that Erik made things up sometimes, but that it would stop, and we should keep it just between us, or he'd kill me.
Holy shit.
Did you ever tell anybody what you thought was going on?
No, I told him I would never tell anybody. I just wanted to stop.
Did he tell you it would stop?
He did.
And that's as far as I have for today. That's why.
All right, you want to take a recess then at this
Yes.
point? All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will recess until Monday at 9 o'clock. I want to remind all of you not to discuss this case among yourselves or with anyone else. Don't form any final opinions about this case. Don't permit yourself to be exposed to anything at all that relates to this case outside of the courtroom. As I've said many times, you must make your decision based only on the evidence presented to you in the courtroom and my instructions on the law. We'll be in recess until Monday at 9 o'clock. Everyone have a good weekend. We'll see you back here then.
Wow. Oh. Yeah, cross-examination is gonna suck. Yeah. That was rough. That was really, really rough to listen to. The photos, the personal abuse, the way that Lyle described taking it out on Erik out in the woods. Holy crap. That's just a lot to take in. That's a lot to take in. And the fact that that wasn't allowed in the second trial is quite a lot to think about. Christ. This is, you can tell why people are so passionate about this case. There is a lot here that they went through. I mean, I think it takes a lot. You kind of have to ignore a lot to watch this testimony, to have gone through what we've gone through so far and watched through the prior testimony leading up to this, and then to see this testimony right here and say, I think he's lying. I think he's making it up. These emotions look so real. I mean, Erik's emotions as he's listening to Lyle describe how he took him out in the woods. Yeah, people pointed out that vein popping out on the side of his head. That is not something that is just casually manufactured by someone. Good Lord. That was a lot to go through. Thank you so much for going with me on on this journey. It's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I am so sorry to everyone that is feeling very heavy now at this point. But we've often talked about these kind of tough topics, and we've gone through tough testimony before in the past. And I always hate leaving on such a dark note, and this is such a dark place to cut it off, but this is where they've cut off part one. And I think that they ended for the day here. You know, do whatever you need to do to feel okay. Go outside, go for a walk, cuddle some fur buddies, do something. Something to feel healthy. Um, and if you're feeling like the world is kind of a dark place, focus on one thing that you can do. Like, we can't control anything that happened in this trial, right? It happened in 1993. Even if it were today, we wouldn't be able to impact anything on the outcome. Nor should we be able to, right? Because we're just observers. And we can't change anything that happened in the past for Erik or Lyle. But this is something that is very uncomfortable to sit through, but being able to sit through this and listen to it and listen to something to the experience that someone had is, I think, a very valuable skill to have, to be able to listen to it and analyze it and be able to decide one way or another, where the truth is. And sometimes you have to sit through some very, very uncomfortable conversations or topics. But if you feel like the world is a dark place, sometimes the good thing to do is to focus on one good thing that you can do to make the world a little bit brighter again. It can be as big or as small as it needs to be. I like to think about the things that we can do for someone else without expecting any kind of a return from them, whether it's some other animal, some other person. Just one thing without asking for anything in return. Best of all, if it's someone who can't give anything in return. So that's what I choose to do, at the end of these kinds of streams, is walk away and try to just focus on one thing that I can do that is good. To try to bring a little bit of balance. So yeah, let's do that today. I hope that each of you have a good rest of your day, good rest of your week. Take care of yourselves. Take care of one another. That's always the best way to live. And otherwise, Friday should be members only live stream. I will be. Yeah, I think I should. Yeah, I'll be. So I'm going on another trip, going to Catalina, but I should be coming back. I don't think that the live stream on Friday will interfere with that. So that should be still on schedule. But thank you to everybody for watching and for joining in the chat and for all of the respectful agreement and disagreement. Thank you to all of the mods who are helping to make sure that the conversation gets ushered in a constructive kind of way, and so that people feel free to agree or disagree. And yeah, I appreciate every single one of you. So thank you for being here. And I'll see you guys in the next one.